Good morning. Good morning if you're watching this live, and if you're watching this at some other time of the day. Hello, how are you? I'm sure glad you've tuned in. Welcome to this worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Salem, where we respect and observe the democratic processes, because this form of governance gives everyone a voice and a vote. It's spiritually grounded, it's fair, and it's mutually enriching. Our democratic heritage, both in our religious association and in our nation's history, is a vital one, and it was desecrated in our nation's capital on January the 6th, a day that will live in infamy. During this time, we are profoundly concerned for the soul of our nation. Many years ago, I was living and working in Washington, D.C., and late one spring afternoon, I was picking up some documents from the United States Capitol. It's a building I had often been in, but this time was different because I found myself all alone in the rotunda of the Capitol. And I gazed up at the slanting shafts of sunlight shining down on paintings of the nation's founding. I had the room all to myself. And when I realized this, I was overwhelmed with a sense of awe that I stood alone in this room. And I felt gratitude for all that this room represented, the loftiest hopes and dreams of our forebears. The American dream, the American vision is at its best a universal vision of a beloved community of people who represent all races and creeds and colors from around the world. And even as I had the room to myself, I knew that this room, this vision, belongs to all of us. And that room has now been desecrated at the instigation of someone who has served the highest office in the land in the lowest possible ways. And he has disgraced himself and greatly damaged our democracy. He has misled his followers with an unending fountain of lies about the integrity of the recent election. He is a traitor. He is a traitor who instigated a mob to overturn the will of the people. The damage he has done to democracy far exceeds what the mob did to our Capitol building. It is tragic. It's sad beyond words. When something has been desecrated, what do we do? I look to the example of Representative Andy Kim of New Jersey, who, after the failed insurrection, he spent hours cleaning up our Capitol, the heart of our democracy. He wanted to clean it up so that the sun would not rise on the trash and the destructive desecration he saw that day. And in doing so, Representative Kim began the reconsecration in which we must all join. When there is a desecration, we reconsecrate. Even as we face uncertain days, we know that those who seek to attack us may cause harm, but they will not succeed. They will not succeed. So welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Salem, where we seek to reconsecrate that which has been desecrated by helping to clean up our national messes, by rededicating ourselves to the common good. And a good step in that direction is to hearken to the example of the one whom we will honor in our service today, Martin Luther King Jr., truly a great American. Welcome.
Our opening hymn today is One More Step. It's number 168 in the gray hymnal.
One more step, we will take one more step, till there is peace for us and everyone. We'll take one more
we gather with full knowledge of our shortcomings. We sometimes fall short of our own expectations, and we don't always have the answers. But we are a community. We're together on this quest for truth and meaning. May these words give us courage and hope. Please join me as we speak our affirmation. Love is our doctrine. Compassion is our way. Here we seek to create a joyful home for free religious exploration. Build a community of caring fellowship, nurture the hopes, and serve the needs of our world. May we light these chalices to serve as a torch to light the way, as a fire to warm our hearts, as a spark of love and kindness to share with others. May this tradition give us roots in our past, yet always light the way forward to an ever more fair and kind world. It is our tradition here at UUCS to light 3 chalices. The first is for our congregation, our members, and our friends. The second is for our partner church in Šiman-Falva, Transylvania, Romania. And the third is for our children and youth who will become the keepers of the flame. Please join me in singing the flame into light.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
Please join us for the live Zoom religious education exploration program at 9:45 on Sunday mornings, or the youth group meeting, which happens on Thursdays at 5 p.m. All are welcome.
Take a deep breath. Maybe another one too. Bring yourself into this moment. This is a hard time. The forces of hatred and anger have been unleashed. It is a time of violence and discord, uncertainty, anxiety. The sky is dark and cloudy. Many cannot see the light of love, the light of compassion. And so you pause. You slow down. You open your heart to the heights and depths within and look for the light, the North Star of compassion. It always guides us in the true direction. Where is compassion guiding you now? Where is compassion calling you to go? What is compassion asking you to do? Pay attention. You will know. Let us pause now and consider this. How might our compassion flow like clear water out to a thirsty world? Think of how your compassion will flow in this world. To whom? For what? How? resolve to be a compassionate presence in this world. For compassion is our way. And gratitude. Standing in a long line for a long time. Finally make it. Sit down to get my first vaccine. Young National Guardswoman giving shots. What do you do? She asks. Minister, what's your favorite Bible verse? While I'm answering, I'm unaware of the shot she just gave me. She directed my attention away out of compassion. I'm grateful for her compassion, grateful for the shot, grateful for the scientists and the doctors and the healthcare professionals and all others who made it possible for me to have this vaccine. I'm grateful beyond words for all the ways that other people offer countless blessings that enrich my life. Be aware. Be aware. And you'll be grateful. Be grateful, and you'll be happy. So be aware and be happy. Gratitude, compassion, these are the paths we walk. Amen.
We welcome you to please share your joys and concerns on our website. You can see the directions on this slide.
Our pastoral hymn today is We Shall Overcome. It's number 169 in the gray hymnal.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. do believe we'll walk hand in hand someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all be free someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live in peace someday.
This is for the Pullman Porters, who organized when people said they couldn't, and carried the Pittsburgh Courier and the Chicago Defender to the Black Americans in the South so they would know they were not alone. This is for the Pullman Porters, who helped Thurgood Marshall go south and come back north to fight the fight that resulted in Brown versus Board of Education, because even though both the bluesmen and the racemen, so that they both would know what was going on. This is for the Pullman Porters, who smiled as if they were happy and laughed like they were tickled when some folks were around, and who silently rejoiced in 1954 when the Supreme Court announced its 9-0 decision that separate is inherently unequal. This is for the Pullman Porters, who smiled and welcomed a 14-year-old boy onto their train in 1955. They noticed his slight limp that he tried to disguise with a doo-wop walk. They noticed his stutter and probably understood why his mother wanted him out of Chicago during the summer when school was out. 14-year-old black boys with limps and stutters are apt to try to prove themselves in dangerous ways when their mothers aren't around to look after them. So this is for the Pullman Porters, who looked over that 14-year-old while the train rolled the reverse of the Blues Highway from Chicago to St. Louis to Memphis to Mississippi. This is for the men who kept him safe. And if Emmett Till had been able to stay on a train all summer, he would maybe have grown a bit of a paunch, certainly lost his hair, and probably have worn bifocals and bounced his grandchildren on his knee telling them about his summer riding the rails.
But he had to get off that train and ended up in Money, Mississippi, and was horribly, brutally, inexcusably, and unacceptably murdered. This is for the Pullman porters who, when the sheriff was trying to get the body secretly buried, got Emmett's body on the northbound train, got his body home to Chicago, where his mother said, "I want the world to see what they did to my boy." And this is for all the mothers who cried. And this is for all the people who said, "Never again."
And this is about Rosa Parks, whose feet were not so tired. It had been, after all, an ordinary day until the bus driver gave her an opportunity to make history. This is about Mrs. Rosa Parks, who was also the field secretary of the NAACP. This is about the moment Rosa Parks shouldered her cross, put her worldly goods aside, and willing to sacrifice her life so that that young man in Money, Mississippi, who had been so well protected by the Pullman porters, would not have died in vain. When Mrs. Parks said no, a passionate movement was begun. No longer would there be reliance on the law. There was a higher law. When Mrs. Parks brought that light of hers to expose the evil of the system, the sun came and rested on her shoulders, bringing the heat and the light of truth. Others would follow Mrs. Parks. 4 young men in Greensboro, North Carolina, would also say no. Great voices would be raised, singing the praises of God and exhorting us to forgive those who trespass against us. But it was the Pullman porters who safely got Emmett to his granduncle. And it was Mrs. Rosa Parks who could not stand that death. And in not being able to stand it, she sat back down.
Thank you, Janet, for that powerful reading. Thank you, Laura, for the powerful music, and Kit, your music too. You know, the first image I ever saw of Martin Luther King Jr., I can still see it too. It was a dreadful image. It was a dreadful image the first time I saw an image of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It was on a bumper sticker that showed his head on the body of a rat, and it said, "King Rat." That's the first image I ever saw of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And in segregated Columbus, Georgia in the late 1950s and the early 60s, this kind of bumper sticker wasn't even controversial and generally reflected the opinion of many in my white community, the only one I knew. But I just knew that something was not right with this level of vicious hatred, but I was really too young to understand what was going on. I had no idea that nearby, very nearby Columbus, Georgia, a little bit over to the west in Montgomery and to the east in Atlanta, this black preacher who was so despised and reviled by those around me was rising above this hatred so that we could all be inspired to rise above the anger and hatred in our world and find a better way. It's hard to imagine how the history of our nation would have unfolded had there been no Martin Luther King Jr. It's hard to imagine how the history of our nation would have unfolded if there had been no Martin Luther King Jr. It's not hard to imagine that another charismatic black leader could have arisen to prominent leadership in the civil rights movement if King had never been born. That's not hard to imagine. But the likelihood that whoever the leader was that would have appeared in King's place, the likelihood that they would have accomplished what King did in his too short life, 39 years, it strikes me as exceedingly remote. Fortunately for our nation, Dr. King did exist. The concern now is that as the memory of his life and ministry fades and becomes more remote, we are increasingly vulnerable to shrunken down, distorted, incomplete images of who he really was, images that fail to recognize his full stature and what he represented. And this is not just a matter of having a full, accurate historical record. It's a matter of understanding the fullness of Dr. King's message and his methods, because we need this. We need this to empower us to complete the journey he helped us begin. When King was alive, our own government sought to deface his image by destroying his reputation. They threatened him and even tried to coerce him into committing suicide. This scandalous behavior of the FBI is a matter of historical record. And yet it was their reputation, not King's, that was damaged by J. Edgar Hoover's cruel and clumsy efforts. Yet such failed and futile efforts to destroy King's reputation, the ugly efforts that I saw in my own life when I was young, that's not the problem that we face today. What concerns me is something more subtle and insidious. Consider, in 1963, King delivered his I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C. I think it's probably the most famous speech in American history. And it is a beautiful speech, inspiringly delivered in King's cadenced and compelling voice. But this speech now is almost always heard out of the context of King's fuller vision for America. And there's a reason for this. The reason for this is because King's vision is too revolutionary for the powers that seek to maintain the social and political status quo. What is missing when all that people know is this one relatively short speech? What is missing is a deeper understanding of his calls to restructure American society. King's vision was one that especially condemned what he called the three evils of American society. The three evils of American society were racism and poverty and militarism. Racism, poverty, and militarism. King was a severe critic of American-style capitalism and the injustices and the inequities that resulted from this. And he called for radical changes that would curtail the power of these three evils that caused such harm. And even as he criticized American capitalism, he also deplored the crippling totalitarianism of the Soviet Union's harsh ideological imposition of communism by force. King noted that immoral means cannot bring about moral ends. Immoral means cannot bring about moral ends. Simply put, America likes to hear about King's vision of a beloved community, but does not like to hear about the hard work, the radical transformation it will take to get there. It's like imagining that you can magically build a dream house without laying a foundation to support it. In his seminary days, King despaired when he considered all the racial and social and political changes that needed to happen in America. And he recognized how much blood, sweat, and tears it was probably going to take to bring this all about. And he was especially worried about the blood that was going to be spilled, because he knew that Southern segregationists would resist change through the use of violent police and vigilante force. They always did. You could expect it. He thought about this. How are we going to make the changes we need to make? He thought back about the Nat Turner's slave rebellion in 1831 and the massacre that ensued, the massacres of blacks that ensued after that. And he concluded that it was simply going to be suicidal and counterproductive for a black minority to strike back against a heavily armed police state. So what could they do? He didn't know. He did not know. But then came that fateful afternoon during his student days in seminary when King heard a lecture by the president of Howard University, Mordecai Johnson. Johnson had just spent 50 days in India studying Mahatma Gandhi's highly effective nonviolent protests against British rule. And President Johnson, Mordecai Johnson of Howard University, he ended his lecture that day by noting that the moral power of Gandhian nonviolence could be an effective tool to improve race relations in America. And when he said that, for King, a light went on. He was transfixed by this lecture and the notion that a nonviolent truth force of protesters committed to confronting the racist state might prove effective. He had never wrapped his mind around such a concept before, and now he began to think about it. He wrote in his journal, "The message was so profound and electrifying that I left the meeting and bought half a dozen books on Gandhi's life and works." As King studied Gandhi's life, he was really surprised, very surprised, to learn that Gandhi had a really, really bad temper. He began his life as a young man with a really bad temper. Gandhi had embraced nonviolence originally as a means of taming his own violent temperament, which he had often abusively turned on his faithful wife, Kasturba. Shocking, but true. And thus, Gandhi, to transform himself, began a long program of personal growth wherein he learned to channel his anger and transform that energy, that angry energy. Don't try to let it go. Use it for something good. He channeled that energy into steadfast courage and commitment to his cause of Indian independence. So King grew up keenly aware of oppressive injustice in the segregated South. He had felt incredible anger towards white people, incredible anger, and who could blame him? And he realized that he was being called to walk a similar path of personal transformation, channel that anger in a creative way. And as King learned about Gandhi's teaching of satyagraha, good translation is soul force. You may hear that term, that the key concept in Gandhi's nonviolent philosophy, satyagraha, soul force. King was especially struck by Gandhi's insistence that it be predicated upon love for the oppressor and a belief in divine justice. And that the goal of Gandhi's nonviolent campaigns, was not to defeat the British. The goal of his campaign was not to defeat the British. The goal of his campaign was to win them over by love. Satyagraha, soul force, brought together love and the nonviolent use of force into one powerful package. Very powerful. And even as this doctrine was grounded in the best of Gandhi's Hindu faith, so too was King's embrace of nonviolence grounded in the best of King's Christian faith. Most especially his undying insistence that the movement he led as a minister be grounded in love, agape love, the kind of love that knows no boundaries, that even loves the oppressor, even as you nonviolently oppose them. Now, before Gandhi proved otherwise, many didn't even believe it was possible for a mass movement to be grounded in such high-minded principles, since the common people, they wouldn't have the spiritual maturity to practice nonviolent resistance, people thought. In fact, it was the common people who had the most spiritual maturity, born of necessity and hard experience, as was proven in India and American South during the Civil Rights era. They were the ones who were most prepared to practice this nonviolent protest. Even so, even today, there are many skeptics who consider the successes of Gandhi and King in using nonviolent philosophy, well, those were special circumstances. Those are exceptions, they say. King's nonviolent philosophy is now widely ignored by activists. A few years ago, the American-Norwegian scholar Dr. Erika Chenoweth, she set out to prove that nonviolence just doesn't work. It's impractical and it's ineffective. And so she started studying this. She wanted to lay it out and sort of get it out of the way. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. And she told us about this at a lecture. It was a Salem Peace lecture a few years ago. Chenoweth was an unlikely person to be giving this lecture because she is no peacenik. She was no peacenik, but her research kept indisputably leading her to a conclusion she didn't want to go to, but eventually she could see that she was proving the opposite of what she wanted to prove through her research. Because as she studied various revolutionary movements, she discovered that the ones that were guided by nonviolent resistance were more than twice as likely to be successful as those that employed violence or violent, hateful rhetoric. Furthermore, nonviolent movements did not create a legacy of enduring division and bitterness because participants in these campaigns didn't seek to dehumanize and humiliate those who had oppressed them. Sometimes I try to imagine how different our world would be if some groups that did resort to violence to fight against injustice, I think of the Irish and the Palestinians, for example, what if they had chosen to follow Gandhi's example of organized nonviolent resistance? How would history be different if they had taken that path? I think it would be a lot better. But on this day, before Martin Luther King Jr. Day, that thought prompts me to imagine just the opposite as I did at the beginning of my remarks. How would our nation and our world have fared if Martin Luther King Jr. had not arisen as a natural leader and chosen the path of nonviolent resistance against the racist, segregationist state? I shudder to imagine. And I only do so as a means of making us aware of how indebted we are to Martin Luther King Jr. for embracing, loving, nonviolent resistance when he had every reason to choose a path of hate and violence. Who could have blamed him? And yet he chose this higher path. Yet, just as America too often ignores the revolutionary core of King's message, too many revolutionaries dismiss the revolutionary, nonviolent side of King's philosophy, and his full image is thus generally forgotten or ignored or distorted and for bad reason. Nonviolent activism is hard work. It's hard work, and it's necessary work. As John Wood of the advocacy organization Braver Angels has noted, nonviolence is a harder discipline morally and strategically. It requires mastery of the inner self in a way that silences the roar of anger and raises the voice of conscience. It requires unending forgiveness for those who wrong us. And it demands that this spirit be mobilized in our activism. In truth, it does not honor Martin Luther King Jr. to envision a tame, domesticated image of him without the revolutionary bite, because he was calling for some radical social, economic, and political changes. He was. And those seeking revolutionary change would do well to remember his lessons in nonviolence and remember that immoral means cannot bring about moral ends. Immoral means cannot bring about moral ends. The changes we need to make requires a radical love whose dying embers in our polarized nation need to be fanned back into life, now more than ever. Let's pause. Here we are in the most tumultuous time in our nation's history and our lives. And there is hatred. And there is anger. And there is division. And we face choices. We can pretend that nothing is wrong. Or we can pretend that there's nothing we can do. Or we can choose to be engaged in the struggles for justice, the struggles to end racism, struggles to end poverty and militarism. Let us keep that vision before us. Let us keep that vision before us. Let us remember that the way to that vision is the path that Martin Luther King Jr. showed us. It's the path of nonviolence. It's the path of love. It's the path of hope. It's the path of reconciliation and redemption. And so we remember this great soul who died so young. We remember his full image that we might fulfill the promise that he showed us, the promise of a dream. And so let us continue, and we will overcome. We will overcome someday. Amen.
Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change we seek. Barack Obama. At UUCS, we share our blessings through the works of our many teams, groups, and ministries, and through our Share the Plate program. This month, we are proud to contribute to Family Promise. They deliver life-saving services, prevention, shelter, and stabilization to families in need. Families with children make up a third of the homeless population in Marion and Polk counties. Your contributions make a difference and are greatly appreciated. You can donate by going to our website and clicking on Donate, or by sending your contributions here to UUCS. Reverend Rick will light our social justice lantern to symbolize the carrying out of the light in each of us into the greater world. As we extinguish our chalices, I'd like to share a poem by the great African-American poet Langston Hughes. It's called I Too. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me,
eat in the kitchen, then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I, too, am America.
Do you see that slide about the Zoom fellowship gathering right after the service today? And in just a few minutes, about a half an hour. So I hope you'll join us for that. So you'll have an opportunity to have some interaction, even if it's not in person. It's certainly superior to doing nothing. So we're grateful for all the volunteers who help make that possible. So please do join us for the Zoom fellowship after the service today. You can see the Zoom registration information on our website. Also, I just want to draw your attention to some of the announcements for our congregation, and you can read about those more on the website, but I wanted to mention that Habitat and Hope Village are having information sessions on Wednesdays at 6:30 until February the 7th, when we'll be having a congregational meeting to vote on whether or not to lease some property to Habitat and Hope Village. And I will be speaking about this from the pulpit on the last Sunday of the month, so we'll learn a lot more about that then. Also wanted to show you some prayer flags. Have you come by to make your prayer flag yet? You can see the prayer flag slide, but I've got a bunch of beautiful prayer flags here on the pulpit that I can show you. Here's some that were made yesterday. There's a good one. And here's a good yin-yang one. I'm trying to excite you. Oh, this is, somebody did some stitching and a beautiful prayer flag. I'll show you one more. I have to show you this one. This is beautiful. This young boy came in and did it yesterday. Vaughn. See the birds? These prayer flags are to symbolize our hopes and dreams for the coming year. And so I hope that you will schedule a time either to come in and make your prayer flag here, or just let us know that you would like a prayer flag, and we'll mail you the materials and instructions on how to make one. We want to fill this sanctuary with prayer flags, so please do make one. I think that's enough for the announcements. You can read the rest in our order of in our website and in the slides that were projected. Thank you.
Our closing hymn today is Lift Every Voice and Sing. It's number 149 in the Gray Hymnal. We're going to sing verses 1 and 3. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening
Please join your hearts with those you love and join me in offering our closing words as a blessing to the world. May faith in the Spirit of life, hope for the community of earth, and love for the sacred in one another be ours now and in all the days to come.